Hey guys, you're welcome to my channel. So thank you for stopping by today. And if this is your first time of discovering this channel, it's centered around sewing. I make sewing tutorial videos and pattern drafting. So in today's tutorial, I'll be sharing with you guys how to make a Milkmaid bustier top, and I'm making use of an Ankara fabric in the making of this top in today's tutorial. So thank you to all my subscribers for subscribing to my channel, and if you're yet to subscribe to my channel, kindly do so, and I assure you you'll never regret subscribing to this channel. So to get started with this stuff, the first thing we have to go ahead to do now is to draft the basic bodice. So from that top part of my paper, I'm just going to mark 3/4 of an inch, and that part is going to be my guide. And after making all these dots, I'm going to connect it into a straight line using my ruler. So this is it. After doing that, the next thing I'm going to do is to divide my shoulder of 14 inches into two, and I have 7 inches, and I'll make a mark right there. And from that point as well, I'll come down by 8 inches, and that will be my armhole length. So on that 8 inches, this point I made here, I'm just going to connect it into a straight line. And after connecting it into a straight line, I'm also going to connect from that point which I made at that upper line down to this second line which I made here. So after that, now I'll go ahead now and label that first line my shoulder line, because that's actually what it is. So I'll come to the base of my paper. I'm going to mark a neck width of 3 inches and a neck depth of 3 inches. So this neck area here is not really needed, but for the sake of this tutorial, I had to go ahead to mark it. So this is me marking it and connecting just like this. That's the neck depth to the neck width. So I'll come back to my armhole area, and I'm going to measure my armhole. I'm going to divide it into 2 equal halves, and whatever I have, I'm going to make a point at that point. So I divided my armhole of 8 inches into 2, and I went ahead to mark the middle part. So the next thing I'm going to do is to come in by half of an inch from that part where I made a point. So on this second line, I'm going to divide my bust circumference of 38 inches into 2, and I have 9.5 inches, and I went ahead to make a point right there. So I'm just going to connect all of these dotted lines from my shoulder line to the half of an inch which I came in by to my bust circumference divided into 4. So this is simply it, and I'm just going to connect just like this. So after this, now go ahead and label that line my chest line, because that's what it actually is. So after that, now I'll go ahead and impute all my other body measurements. So from my shoulder to my nipple, I have 10 inches. From my shoulder to my under bust, I have 13 inches. From my shoulder to my half length, I have 16 inches. And the top length I'm working with here is 19 inches. So I'll mark my 19 inches, and I'll go ahead and add extra 1 inch for my hemming allowance. So these marks I made here, I'm just going ahead to repeat it on this other side of the paper. So I'll go ahead and mark my 10 inches, my 13 inches, my 16 inches, my 19 inches, and my 20 inches respectively. And I'm just going to use my ruler to connect this into a straight line, just like this. So after connecting all of that, the next thing I'll go ahead to do is to label all these lines so you understand properly what we are doing right here. So I have my bust point, that's from my shoulder to my nipple. I have my under bust, which is from my shoulder to my under breast. I have my waistline, I have my top length, and I have my 1 inch hemming allowance. So after labeling all of this and taking note of all these lines, I'll go ahead and divide my nipple to nipple measurement of 7 inches into 2, and I have 3.5 inches. So I'm just going to make a mark on my bust point, my under bust, my waistline up to my top length. So after making a point on all of these lines, I'm going to use my ruler to connect all these dotted lines into a straight line, just like this. So after connecting, I'm just going to come to my bust point area, and I'm going to come down by 1 inch from my bust point area. So that part label BP, That's the bust point. I'm going to come down by 1 inch, just like this. And on my waistline, that's the WL line, I'm going to mark half of an inch at both sides, just like this. And I'm showing you what half of an inch is here in case you don't know what it is. So half of an inch is half of 1 inch. Okay, so I'm just going to connect from my waistline to my under bust. That's that point where I came down by 1 inch. Okay, so I'm just going to connect just like this. And after connecting, I'm going to extend this dart leg to my full top length. Okay, so having noticed now, the next thing I'm going to do is to come to the center front of my bodies. So the parts I have these labels like the CLBPUB is my side front, but the parts that is facing me is my center front. So I'll just quickly go ahead and label it CF, which is center front, and SF, which is side front. So I'll go ahead and circle this out so you know what I mean. So you come to your under bust, that's the part label UB. You're going to go up like this by 1 inch. Okay, so after marking your 1 inch, you're going to use your curved rule to connect this 1 inch into your under bust line. So you can see what I'm doing here. I'm trying to connect from this 1 inch I went up by and my center front bodies into my under bust, just like this. So you can see how I'm carefully placing this, and this is just simply it. So connect like this and we are progressing. So after this, now I'll go ahead and measure my nipple to nipple measurement of 3.5 inches, started from that my darts line. I'm going to measure it towards the sides front of my dress, and I'll make a point there. So I'll also get my curved rule. I'm going to place it, making sure that it's touching that 3.5 inch nipple to nipple measurement I marked, and I'll make sure I connect like this to my under bust area. So carefully, you've seen how I connected this. So this is just the little trick here. So after that, now on that point, where my cup length actually stopped at the armhole area, I'm going to extend that line to the center front of my dress. So this is just it. And but if you want this curvy or anything, you can actually go ahead at this point to create that. So on my chest line, I already have my bust point of 38 inches divided into my bust circumference. I have the mark there, so I'm going to leave that point and move over to my under bust. I'm going to divide my under bust into 4, and whatever I have, I'm quickly going to make a mark at that point, just like this. And I'll move over to my waistline. I'll divide my waist circumference into 4, and I'm just going to mark whatever I have there. So I'll also make the same mark on my top length and to my full length. Okay, so this is it, basically what I mean here. So after this, I'm just going to use my ruler to connect all of these dotted lines together. So here, after connecting all these lines together, I'm just going ahead now to replace my dart intake. So we have a dart intake of 1 inch, and I'll go ahead now to replace this. I went ahead to mark 1 inch right here, and after marking this 1 inch, I'm going to connect just like this, and here we have our dart replaced. So this is basically it, and the next thing I'll go ahead now to do is to add my sewing or stitching allowance. But before that, I'm going to blend in my pointy area at the under bust area. Okay, so I'll go ahead and mark 1 inch all around from the beginning to the end of my dress. That will be my stitching allowance. So I use my curve drill to blend in this pointy or sharp edge, because it doesn't need to be pointy or sharp. Okay, so this is just basically it. And for my sewing or joining allowance, I went ahead as well to repeat the same thing at that point. Okay, so this is just basically it, and we are done drafting the front part of this dress. So after this whole stuff, now you just go ahead and cut out this already drafted bodice. Okay, so at that point, if you feel like you want to cover up your boobs well, you can go by 2 inches. So me, I'm okay, I'm satisfied with that, so I maintained the line. So go ahead and cut out the sides, the top length. So watch carefully to know the part I'm actually cutting. So from that top part, I'm also going to make a cut all through. And the next thing I'm going to cut out here is the armhole area. So I'm not cutting out on the cup area yet, because I would be tracing out the back part of this dress using this front part. So I'll trace it out first before I'll go ahead to cut out my cup area. I hope it's understood. So what I'm simply going to do at this point now is that I'm going to get another piece of paper, and I'm just going to make a straight line. That will be my guideline, and from the base I'm going to mark 1/2 of an inch, and after marking this 1/2 of an inch, I'll use my ruler and connect this into a very straight line. And after connecting this, I'll just label that my zip allowance. So here is for the back. Now that's what I'm actually trying to draft here. So after that, I'm going to place my front bodies on exactly that line where my zip allowance stopped, just like this. So go ahead and pin this together. Please don't use your free hand if you're not used to that. Go ahead and pin this together and trace out just the same way I'm tracing out. So this is me tracing this out without pinning, because I'm used to doing that all the time. So go ahead and trace out just this way, and I'm going to keep that aside because we are not done working with the front part of this dress. So I'll go ahead now to cut out at this my cup area. So you can see how I'm carefully cutting this out. So you too should carefully cut yours out just the same way I'm doing right here in this video. So here now I'm going to keep this my front busy bodies aside, because I'm going to be working on this cup. So at this point here, I'm going to be slashing and spreading on this cup area. So I'm going to be slashing with 1 inch apart. So that is what I just basically went ahead to make marks on. That's 1 inch apart. So after marking this 1 inch apart, I'm going to use my straight ruler and connect this just like this, the way I'm doing right here. And after connecting all these lines, I'll just go ahead now to differentiate all of these parts using numbers. So from the beginning parts, I'm going to label 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So I have 8 pieces here. So I'll be cutting or slashing through all these numbers using this line as a guideline for me. So I'll do this from 1 to the end, which is from 1 to 8. I'll slash this all through to the end. Okay. So after slashing this, the next thing is to bring a new paper that is together. So I actually felt pain here because I thought that this was recording when it wasn't, but I'm going to explain how I got about this. So after slashing and spreading, you're just going to get a new paper And I just got this new paper, and the next thing you're going to do is that you fold this new paper into two. The reason is for you to get this fold line that will act as a guide for you. So I folded mine, and when I got the middle, I went ahead to use this blue marker to highlight it. Okay, so I went ahead to use that marker to connect a straight line. That was the first thing I did. So I'm going to assume that I've not pinned all these numbers here. So the next thing I did is to move away from the edge of my pattern paper by 1 inch, and I started pinning this down. So I am just going to remove this number 1 I have here so you understand better. So the reason for that line I marked first is for it to serve as a guide, because you wouldn't want to place all this your already slashed piece and some will be high and some will be low. So the reason is because this line I'm pointing right there is the bust point line. Remember, we cut out from the under bust, meaning that the line before the under bust is the bust point area. So I just made sure that that line which I'm pointing at aligns exactly with the bust point line on all of this piece I have right here. I don't know if you understand. So from the edge of my paper, I just moved away by 1 inch, and I went ahead to pin my number 1, making sure that the line on my number 1 aligns with the line on this paper. I hope you understand my explanation. I really do apologize. I was so heartbroken when I realized it, but it was late already. So I'm going to assume that I've not actually pinned my number 2 to this paper. So after pinning my number 1, you're going to determine how wide you want this to be, or how many inches you want to spread this out. So for me, I went ahead to use 2.5 inches to spread this out. So I'm going to assume I've not pinned other numbers, so you can see the 2.5 inches I marked initially when I thought I was filming, which I wasn't. So you can see it at that point. So the next thing I'll go ahead to do is to bring down my number 2, making sure that that same line aligns with the line I drew on this paper. Okay, so you can see I'm making and laying emphasis on that line. So the purpose of the first line on this paper is to act as a guide, so you don't have this your piece some being higher and some being lower. At the end of the day, you're going to have a shapeless cup. So this is it, and I made sure it's aligned. I went ahead to use my office pin to pin this down. So this is just simply what I did, and I just repeated the same process for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So in between all of this spread, what I have is 2.5 inches or 2.5 inches. So measuring it, you can see that this is exactly what I have in between. So you can decide to spread by 1 inch, 1.5, 2 inches, 2.5, or even 3 inches. So it's totally up to you and your preference. So after I did all of that, the next thing I went ahead to do is to trace out this stuff the way it is, and I used my ruler as a guide. So that was the last thing I did before I realized I wasn't filming. So I used my ruler now to connect for the top part alone. So this is just what I did here after all the pinning. So I connected all of this top part first, and I went ahead to connect the sides, like more like tracing out the sides. And after tracing out the sides, I went ahead to trace out the bottom part of this my cup. So this is simply what I did. There was no extra activity here. The only problem was I didn't record, which I feel so sorry about. So but if you don't really understand this, you can actually drop it in the comment section, your complaints. I'll make a separate video on how to slash and spread. Okay, but if you still understand, I really do appreciate that. Okay, so this is just what I did, and after tracing this out, I will just go ahead to cut this out. So you can see that this whole line is aligning. So just please repeat this process which I've shared with you here so you get a perfect slash and spread. Okay, so go ahead now and cut this out. Cut out the top part, cut out the sides, and cut out the bottom part. Okay, so you can see what I have right here. You can see how nice it's all looking and aligned. So move over to the back part. So we'll finish up with the back part of this our basic bodies. So now I'll go ahead and bring my front basic bodies to mark the that area which I didn't mark initially, because I wouldn't want to go through the stress of starting a whole afresh to draft a back basic bodies. Okay, so I went ahead, sorry, to mark out the under bust line and the bust point line, which is just the next line after the chest line. Okay, so I'll remove these front bodies and I'm just going to extend all these dotted points into a straight line. So after this now, I'm just going to mark my nipple to nipple of 3.5 inches, starting from that line. Okay, so after this I'm going to connect these dotted lines into a straight line. So I came down by 1 inch from my bust point and I connected just like this. I connected this into my bust point. So I'm going to determine the type of neckline which I need for the back. Usually I don't like it being straight, so I want it curvy. So this is just it. So this is just basically it, and I use my curved rule to make a curve. So after that we're done with this back bodies pattern, and go ahead and cut out everything you have left. So after cutting this out now, I'll go ahead to cut out that zip area. If you've been following me on this channel, you understand what I mean, to avoid this bulginess at the back of your dress after sewing. So you can see the front and the back looking all nice, and you can see the cup area. So this is basically it, and I'm go ahead now to cut out on my actual fabric, and I'm making use of an Ankara piece here. So I'll go ahead and cut out and also add 1/2 inch all around these areas. So I'll show you guys how to do this. So here is the Ankara piece I'm working with, and it's 2 yards of fabric I have here with me. So I went ahead to fold. After folding, I went ahead to place my front bodies on it, and as you can see, I'm pinning this together. So you go ahead and cut out exactly the same way you pinned, but for the cup area you realize that I went away by 1/2 inch from my pattern paper. So go ahead and measure that area, and that is just basically it. So you're going to repeat the same process for the back part of this dress. So for the top part, that's the only part where you're going to be adding your 1/2 inch, like you're moving away by 1/2 inch from your actual pattern paper. So now after cutting, you go ahead as well to also fold into 2 for the cup area. So fold into 2 and pin this down, and after pinning this down so it doesn't shift or move, you go ahead as well to also include 1/2 inch or move away by 1/2 inch from the actual pattern paper. So this is it, and thank you for watching. I really do appreciate. If you're here to subscribe at this point, please kindly do so. And to all my subscribers, God bless you a whole lot. Thank you so much for subscribing to my channel. So in the next part of this tutorial, I will share with you guys how to sew this. So till then, see you same time on the same channel. Bye.